Some
Welcome to your new
neighborhoods
home.
earned their
Follow me and we'll begin the
reputation
tour.
through beautiful homes. Others earned it through kind neighbors. Oakwood Heights claimed to have both. The entrance featured a large stone monument surrounded by colorful flowers that changed with every season. Freshly paved streets curved through rows of elegant homes, while mature oak trees shaded sidewalks where children rode bicycles every afternoon. Every lawn appeared perfectly trimmed, every mailbox looked identical, and every corner reflected the image of a peaceful community where people looked out for one another. To anyone driving through for the first time, Oakwood Heights looked like the perfect place to raise a family. When Daniel and Emily Brooks purchased their home there, they believed they had finally achieved the American dream. Daniel had spent nearly 18 years working as a paramedic. He had built a career helping complete strangers during the worst moments of their lives. Long shifts, sleepless nights, and countless emergencies had taught him that compassion mattered more than appearances. Emily worked as an elementary school teacher. Every day she encouraged children to believe that honesty and kindness always mattered, even when life seemed unfair. Together, they had saved for over a decade. Vacations had been postponed. Old vehicles had been repaired instead of replaced. Luxury had never interested them. Their dream had always been simple: a safe neighborhood, good schools, friendly neighbors, a backyard where their 10-year-old son Noah could play without worry. Oakwood Heights appeared to offer exactly that. The realtor proudly explained that the Homeowners Association maintained high standards to protect property values. Daniel barely listened. He assumed the HOA simply prevented abandoned cars, dangerous properties, or neglected homes. Rules never bothered him. Fair rules protected everyone. He signed the paperwork without concern. The first month felt almost magical. Neighbors welcomed the Brooks family with homemade desserts and friendly introductions. Noah quickly found children his own age. Emily planted colorful flowers beneath the front windows, while Daniel spent weekends building a small cedar planter box beside the porch. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make their new house feel like home. Then came the first violation notice. According to the HOA, the planter box extended 6 inches beyond approved landscaping guidelines. The family had 7 days to remove it. The notice also included a $100 fine. Daniel assumed someone had misunderstood the measurements. He carefully moved the planter closer to the house and paid the fine without complaint. He believed the issue was over. A week later, another notice arrived. This time, the HOA claimed their recycling bin had remained visible after collection day. Another fine. Another warning. Again, Daniel complied. Then came another violation. Their lawn, supposedly, exceeded the maximum permitted height. The strange part was that Daniel had mowed it only 2 days earlier. He walked outside with a measuring tape. The grass matched every neighboring yard. He shrugged, assuming someone had made another honest mistake. Still, he paid the penalty. Emily began reading the HOA handbook more carefully. The rules seemed unusually detailed. Approved mailbox decorations, maximum flower pot sizes, specific fence colors, even limitations on children's outdoor play equipment. Some regulations felt excessive, but they promised themselves they would simply follow the rules. That promise became increasingly difficult. Every correction seemed to create another violation. Their porch wreath, their garden hose, their driveway chalk drawings made by Noah. Each week another letter appeared. Each letter included another fine. One afternoon, Emily noticed something unusual while walking Noah home from school. Across the street, another homeowner displayed bright purple flower pots that clearly violated HOA color guidelines. Farther down the block, a large camper remained parked in a driveway despite community restrictions. Another family stored building materials beside their garage for weeks. No violation stickers appeared. No warning notices. No penalties. Emily quietly mentioned the differences to a longtime resident tending roses nearby. The woman paused before answering. She glanced toward the neighborhood clubhouse, then lowered her voice. Some homeowners seemed to receive much more attention than others. Before Emily could ask another question, the woman politely changed the subject and returned to watering her flowers. The conversation lasted less than a minute. It stayed with Emily for days. Daniel soon noticed something similar. Every time the HOA inspection vehicle entered their street, it slowed dramatically in front of their house. The inspector often photographed their property. Yet homes with obvious rule violations received little more than a quick glance. One Saturday morning, Daniel decided to walk the neighborhood with fresh eyes. Instead of admiring landscaping, he simply observed. He counted 6 driveways where overnight parking rules were ignored. 3 homes displayed unauthorized decorative fencing. Several lawns appeared significantly taller than his own. One basketball hoop remained permanently installed despite handbook restrictions. Nothing happened. No notices. No inspections. Only his family continued receiving letters. The realization unsettled him. Rules were not being applied equally. They were being applied selectively. Daniel requested copies of inspection records. The HOA acknowledged his request, but delayed providing documents. Weeks passed. When records finally arrived, several inspection photographs showed dates that did not match the violation notices. Some pictures appeared heavily cropped. Others lacked timestamps altogether. Instead of answers, the inconsistencies raised even more questions. Meanwhile, the fines continued. By the end of summer, the Brooks family had accumulated nearly $3,000 in penalties. Money they had intended to save for Noah's education disappeared into HOA accounts. The emotional impact proved even greater. Emily stopped decorating the porch. Noah hesitated before riding his bicycle. Daniel inspected the yard every evening as though searching for invisible mistakes. Their dream home slowly became a source of constant anxiety. One evening, while reviewing another violation letter, Daniel noticed a curious detail. Every inspection had been approved by the same HOA board member, Margaret Holloway. She had served on the board for nearly 12 years. According to neighborhood newsletters, she described herself as a defender of community standards. Yet Daniel couldn't ignore another observation. The homes belonging to Margaret's closest friends never seemed to receive citations. Even obvious violations remained untouched. That pattern became impossible to dismiss. It no longer looked like coincidence. It looked intentional. Daniel began keeping careful records. Dates, photographs, inspection times, addresses. He wasn't searching for revenge. He wanted to understand why the rules seemed different depending on whose house they applied to. What he didn't know was that several other homeowners had quietly started collecting the same evidence. They had all reached the same conclusion. The rules were never the real issue. The real issue was deciding who had to follow them. And before long, Daniel Brooks would uncover a secret that would expose years of selective enforcement hidden beneath Oakwood Heights' picture-perfect streets. Daniel Brooks had spent nearly 2 decades making life-or-death decisions as a paramedic. His profession had taught him that emotions often clouded judgment, while facts revealed the truth. That lesson now became his greatest strength. Rather than reacting with frustration every time another HOA violation arrived, Daniel began treating the situation like an investigation. Every evening after work, he walked through Oakwood Heights carrying nothing more than his phone and a small notebook. To anyone watching, he appeared to be enjoying an evening stroll through the neighborhood. In reality, he was documenting everything. He recorded addresses. He photographed visible rule violations. He noted inspection dates. He compared them with the violation notices arriving in his own mailbox. Within only 3 weeks, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Nearly every homeowner who regularly attended HOA social events seemed untouched by inspections. Several board members openly violated community regulations. One home displayed an oversized detached shed that clearly exceeded approved dimensions. Another property had installed a decorative fence nearly 2 feet higher than community guidelines allowed. One family permanently parked a recreational vehicle beside their garage despite strict overnight parking rules. None of them had received warnings. None of them had paid fines. Meanwhile, Daniel received another notice because one of Noah's bicycles had remained visible beside the driveway for less than an hour after school. The penalty was $150. Emily could hardly believe what she was reading. Their son had simply returned home, parked his bicycle beside the mailbox, and gone inside to finish homework. According to the HOA, the bicycle created an unsightly appearance. The wording sounded almost absurd. Daniel quietly paid the fine. Not because he agreed with it, because he wanted every payment documented. Every receipt became another piece of a much larger puzzle. Emily began noticing something equally disturbing while teaching at the local elementary school. Several parents who lived inside Oakwood Heights casually mentioned receiving constant HOA notices. Curiously, every family describing similar experiences shared something else in common. Each had questioned the HOA at some point during the previous few years. One had requested financial records. Another had complained about rising annual dues. One elderly couple had opposed a landscaping contract during an annual meeting. Every one of them suddenly became frequent targets for inspections shortly afterward. The realization unsettled Emily. Perhaps the HOA wasn't simply enforcing rules. Perhaps it was punishing people who refused to stay silent. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel decided to test his growing theory. He deliberately walked through every street inside Oakwood Heights with a printed copy of the HOA handbook. Instead of focusing on his own home, he compared every visible property against the exact regulations. By sunset, he had documented more than 80 obvious violations. Improper fencing, visible trash bins, unauthorized decorations, commercial vehicles parked overnight, basketball hoops left outside permanently, holiday decorations months past their removal deadline, decorative lights exceeding approved brightness. Many belonged to HOA board members themselves. Others belonged to families frequently seen socializing with Margaret Holloway. Daniel carefully organized every photograph. Each image included timestamps and GPS information. Unlike the HOA's inspection records, nothing could be questioned. Facts remained facts. A few days later, another unexpected event occurred. While returning home from work, Daniel noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a park bench near the community clubhouse. The man politely introduced himself as Harold Simmons. He had lived in Oakwood Heights for nearly 25 years. Without discussing details, Harold quietly offered one piece of advice. The problem had never been the rules. The problem was who decided when those rules mattered. Harold explained that years earlier, Oakwood Heights had enjoyed a reputation for fairness. The HOA focused on maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, and resolving genuine maintenance concerns. Everything changed after Margaret Holloway became board president. Gradually, inspections increased. Fines became more common. Board meetings became shorter. Financial questions were discouraged. Neighbors stopped participating. Fear quietly replaced cooperation. The elderly resident admitted that several homeowners had attempted to challenge the board over the years. Most eventually gave up. The legal costs became overwhelming. Others simply moved away. The neighborhood appeared peaceful because many families decided silence was easier than conflict. Before leaving, Harold handed Daniel a folded newspaper clipping from nearly 9 years earlier. The article described a lawsuit involving Oakwood Heights HOA. Although the case had never reached trial, the article mentioned allegations of selective enforcement and inconsistent treatment of homeowners. The lawsuit quietly disappeared after an undisclosed settlement. Nothing changed. Daniel carefully stored the clipping inside his growing evidence folder. The past suddenly seemed connected to the present. Selective enforcement wasn't new. It had become routine. Over the following weeks, Daniel noticed another strange coincidence. Every homeowner receiving repeated violations seemed to live in one particular section of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, streets where several board members lived experienced almost no inspections. To confirm his suspicion, Daniel created a neighborhood map. He marked every violation his family had received. Then he marked every documented violation ignored elsewhere. The completed map revealed 2 completely different neighborhoods existing inside the same subdivision. One lived under constant inspection. The other lived almost entirely without consequences. The visual evidence shocked even Emily. No explanation could justify such dramatic differences. One evening, while organizing photographs at the dining room table, Noah quietly placed something beside his father's notebook. It was a simple drawing created at school. The pictures showed their family standing in front of their home. Above the house floated dozens of envelopes. Instead of sunshine, violation notices filled the sky. Beneath the drawing, Noah had written one heartbreaking sentence. "I hope our house can be happy again." Daniel stared at the picture for several minutes. The fines no longer represented money. They represented childhood memories being replaced by fear. That realization strengthened his determination more than any document ever could. The following weekend, something unexpected happened. As Daniel worked in the backyard, 3 different neighbors visited separately. None stayed long. Each quietly shared nearly identical stories. One family had accumulated over $15,000 in fines after questioning HOA election procedures. A retired teacher described repeated inspections following a request for financial transparency. A military veteran admitted he had refinanced part of his home simply to pay escalating penalties. Every story sounded different, yet every ending remained exactly the same. People stopped asking questions because asking questions always made things worse. Daniel listened carefully. He promised nothing. He simply encouraged everyone to keep copies of every document they still possessed. By the end of the month, several homeowners had quietly formed an informal network. No meetings. No public announcements. Only shared information. They compared violation notices, inspection dates, board correspondence, financial records. The similarities became impossible to dismiss. Late one evening, as Daniel reviewed the growing mountain of evidence, an unfamiliar envelope appeared inside his mailbox. There was no return address. Inside rested a small flash drive. Attached to it was a handwritten note. Only 5 words appeared on the paper. "They never expected us together." Daniel looked across the quiet neighborhood. Porch lights glowed peacefully. Families enjoyed ordinary evenings. From the outside, Oakwood Heights still looked like the perfect American community. But hidden beneath its carefully maintained appearance was a secret someone had protected for years. And whatever waited inside that flash drive had the power to expose selective rule enforcement on a scale far greater than Daniel had ever imagined. Daniel placed the anonymous flash drive on the kitchen table and stared at it for several moments. For weeks, he had documented selective rule enforcement with photographs, inspection dates, and violation notices. The evidence was already convincing, But the message attached to the flash drive suggested something far more significant. They never expected us together. Those 5 words carried a deeper meaning than Daniel realized. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had been collecting evidence. Someone had finally decided it was time to trust another homeowner. After Noah went to bed and the house grew quiet, Daniel and Emily opened the files. The flash drive contained years of carefully organized documents. Every folder was labeled by date. Every document had been scanned with remarkable attention to detail. It became immediately clear that whoever assembled the archive had spent years preparing for this moment. The first folder contained inspection schedules. At first glance, they looked ordinary. But after comparing them with Daniel's own records, something startling appeared. Entire streets had been skipped during routine inspections. Other streets, including Daniel's, were inspected nearly 3 times as often. The difference wasn't accidental. It was systematic. Another folder contained HOA board emails. Most involved ordinary neighborhood business. Hidden among them, however, were messages discussing homeowners by name. Not because their homes violated rules. Because they had become difficult. Residents who questioned budgets. Families requesting financial transparency. Neighbors asking why annual dues continued increasing. The response from board leadership followed the same pattern every time. Increase inspections. Document every possible violation. Make examples of them. Daniel felt a chill as he continued reading. The HOA wasn't protecting property values. It was protecting its own authority. Emily quietly organized another group of files. These focused on financial records. The same landscaping contractor had received nearly every community maintenance contract for 7 consecutive years. Competitive bids were missing. Several invoices charged thousands of dollars for projects homeowners later photographed as incomplete. Other maintenance expenses appeared twice under different descriptions. Nothing looked dramatic by itself. Together, the numbers painted an uncomfortable picture. Money flowed in circles, benefiting the same small group of people. Meanwhile, homeowners continued paying higher dues every year. Another folder contained something even more surprising. Election records, attendance sheets, proxy ballots, meeting sign-in forms. Daniel immediately noticed duplicate handwriting on multiple proxy authorizations. Several ballots listed homeowners who had moved away months before the election. Others carried signatures that looked remarkably similar despite belonging to different people. The irregularities weren't enough to prove fraud on their own, but they raised serious questions about how leadership remained unchanged year after year. Daniel refused to jump to conclusions. Instead, he spent several weeks verifying every document independently. Public records, county filings, vendor registrations, property ownership databases. If any document couldn't be confirmed, he removed it. Only facts remained. As the evidence became stronger, something unexpected began happening throughout Oakwood Heights. Neighbors started talking to one another. Not through rumors. Through shared experiences. Families who had once believed they were being singled out realized dozens of others had lived through nearly identical situations. An elderly widow produced 12 years of violation notices. A retired police officer shared inspection photographs taken on dates when he had been out of state. A young couple presented emails requesting financial records that had never received responses. Every story revealed another piece of the puzzle. Every homeowner filled another gap. Fear slowly transformed into cooperation. Soon, nearly 40 families were quietly contributing documents. Kitchen tables across Oakwood Heights became temporary archives. Boxes filled with receipts, inspection notices, certified letters. financial statements, meeting agendas, property photographs. No one exaggerated. No one fabricated. The truth proved powerful enough without embellishment. Emily noticed another remarkable change. People who had barely spoken to one another for years now worked together. Neighbors helped organize documents. Retired accountants reviewed budgets. Former attorneys explained HOA procedures. Technology professionals backed up digital files. Teachers created timelines. The community was discovering something it had almost forgotten: unity. For years, selective enforcement had isolated homeowners. Each family believed it stood alone. Now everyone understood the real strategy. People are easier to intimidate individually than collectively. Margaret Holloway remained unaware of how much had changed. She continued approving inspections exactly as before. Violation notices still appeared. Fines still increased. But something was different. Instead of quietly paying them, homeowners carefully documented every notice, every inspection, every photograph. The board unknowingly continued creating evidence against itself. Then came the announcement for Oakwood Heights' annual HOA meeting. Attendance had steadily declined over the years. Most residents viewed meetings as meaningless formalities where decisions had already been made. This year felt different. Long before the meeting began, the community clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Families arrived carrying folders instead of frustration. Retirees sat beside young parents. New homeowners greeted longtime residents. No one appeared angry. They appeared prepared. Margaret entered the meeting expecting another routine evening. Financial reports, committee updates, budget approvals. She immediately noticed something unusual. Nearly every seat was occupied. People who had never attended before quietly filled the room. As routine business concluded, Daniel calmly stood. He carried a single binder. Nothing more. Inside rested verified copies of inspection comparisons, public records, financial documents, and election records. He did not accuse anyone. He simply asked questions. Why had certain streets received triple the inspections of others? Why had identical violations produced completely different outcomes? Why had contractor bids never been publicly reviewed? Why were financial reports missing supporting documentation? The room became silent. One by one, other homeowners stood. Not to argue, to present facts. An elderly widow displayed years of selective violations. A retired engineer presented inspection maps. A former accountant identified unexplained budget inconsistencies. A military veteran documented repeated retaliation after requesting meeting minutes. Every presentation remained calm. Professional. Evidence replaced emotion. For nearly 2 hours, homeowners quietly shared documented facts. Margaret repeatedly attempted to redirect discussion toward procedural issues. Time limits, agenda restrictions, committee rules. But something had fundamentally changed. People no longer feared speaking. Each unanswered question inspired another homeowner to stand. Each document encouraged another family to share. The atmosphere shifted from confrontation to accountability. By the time the meeting ended, no official decisions had been made. Yet everyone understood the truth. The illusion of unquestioned authority had disappeared. As neighbors left the clubhouse, they exchanged phone numbers instead of walking away alone. Volunteer groups formed naturally. Evidence was organized. Responsibilities were shared. The movement no longer belonged to Daniel. It belonged to the entire community. Later that evening, while sorting through the latest documents, Daniel received an email notification. The county's Community Association Oversight Division had officially acknowledged receiving a formal complaint supported by documentation from dozens of homeowners. An independent investigation had been opened. For years, every complaint had remained trapped inside the HOA's own system. This investigation would come from outside, beyond the board's influence, beyond Margaret Holloway's control. Daniel quietly closed his laptop. The battle was no longer about convincing neighbors. The truth had finally reached people with the authority to investigate it. And somewhere inside Oakwood Heights, the HOA leadership was beginning to realize that years of selective rule enforcement were about to face their greatest challenge. The announcement of the county investigation spread quietly throughout Oakwood Heights. No official statements appeared on neighborhood bulletin boards. No dramatic confrontations unfolded in the streets. Yet everyone sensed that the community had reached a turning point. For years, the HOA board had operated without meaningful oversight. Homeowners who questioned decisions often found themselves buried beneath violation notices and escalating fines. The pattern had become so familiar that many families simply accepted it as part of living in the neighborhood. This time was different. The investigation did not depend on rumors. It depended on evidence. Over the following weeks, county investigators requested years of HOA records, inspection schedules, financial statements, election documents, vendor contracts, meeting minutes, violation reports, email correspondence. Unlike internal HOA requests that could be delayed or ignored, these requests carried legal authority. Every document had to be produced. Every record had to be explained. For the first time in years, the board no longer controlled the flow of information. Margaret Holloway remained publicly confident. Neighborhood newsletters continued emphasizing the HOA's commitment to protecting property values. Routine maintenance announcements still appeared. Seasonal reminders continued arriving in homeowners' mailboxes. From the outside, little seemed to change. Behind closed doors, however, investigators began uncovering one inconsistency after another. Inspection logs revealed entire neighborhoods receiving little or no enforcement for years. Meanwhile, homeowners who had questioned board decisions experienced inspections several times more frequently than the community average. The differences could not be explained by property conditions. They followed people, not houses. Financial auditors uncovered additional concerns. Several maintenance contracts had repeatedly been awarded to the same landscaping company without competitive bidding. Invoices reflected work that residents documented as incomplete or never performed. Budget increases lacked supporting documentation. Reserve fund expenditures contained unexplained discrepancies. Although not every irregularity suggested intentional misconduct, together they painted a picture of poor governance and a serious lack of transparency. Election records raised even more questions. Multiple proxy forms were incomplete. Attendance records conflicted with meeting minutes. Several ballots lacked proper verification. Independent reviewers concluded that election procedures had failed to meet basic governance standards required under state regulations. One discovery became the defining moment of the investigation. Investigators compared Daniel's neighborhood map with years of official inspection records. The results were undeniable. The same streets had repeatedly received disproportionate enforcement. The same homeowners appeared in violation reports year after year. Nearby homes with nearly identical conditions often received no citations at all. The evidence transformed years of suspicion into documented fact. Selective rule enforcement was no longer an allegation. It had become an official finding. As word quietly spread, something remarkable happened inside Oakwood Heights. Neighbors stopped avoiding one another. Families who had once hurried indoors after checking their mail now gathered outside during warm evenings. Children returned to neighborhood parks. Community barbecues resumed. The atmosphere changed not because every problem had disappeared overnight, but because fear had begun disappearing. Emily noticed flowers returning to front porches throughout the neighborhood. Decorations slowly reappeared. People no longer worried that every small expression of personality would become another violation notice. The neighborhood finally started looking like a place where families actually lived, instead of a place where they constantly felt watched. Several months later, the county released its official report. The findings filled more than 200 pages. The conclusion was clear. The HOA had failed to enforce community rules fairly and consistently. Financial oversight required immediate correction. Election procedures needed complete reform. Governance practices no longer reflected the responsibilities expected of a homeowners association. Corrective actions followed quickly. The existing board resigned before formal removal proceedings concluded. Independent administrators temporarily assumed control of HOA operations. Improper fines issued through inconsistent enforcement were reviewed individually. Hundreds of penalties were canceled. Many homeowners received refunds for fines determined to have been improperly assessed. Inspection procedures were rewritten. Future inspections would require standardized checklists, time-stamped photographs, and independent review before violations could be issued. Board meetings would now be recorded. Financial reports would become publicly available. Major contracts would require competitive bidding. Election procedures would be supervised by independent volunteers from within the community. Transparency replaced secrecy. Consistency replaced favoritism. Most importantly, homeowners regained confidence that rules would finally apply equally to everyone. As Oakwood Heights prepared to elect a new board, many neighbors encouraged Daniel to become the next HOA president. They believed his integrity had earned the trust of the community. Daniel thanked everyone for their confidence. After careful reflection, however, he respectfully declined. His goal had never been to replace one powerful individual with another. He believed the real lesson of Oakwood Heights was that healthy communities should never depend on a single person. They should depend on accountability. Instead, Daniel encouraged homeowners from different backgrounds to serve together. Retired professionals, young parents, veterans, teachers, business owners, longtime residents, new homeowners. The newly elected board reflected the entire neighborhood rather than one small group. Its first official resolution became symbolic. The board voted unanimously to establish a homeowner fairness committee responsible for reviewing complaints independently before fines could ever be issued. No resident would again face repeated enforcement without objective review. The committee's purpose wasn't to eliminate rules. It was to ensure the rules protected everyone equally. Months later, life inside Oakwood Heights felt completely different. Neighborhood events returned. Holiday decorations filled the streets. Children played basketball in driveways until sunset. Homeowners worked together on community beautification projects rather than worrying about unexpected violation letters. Property values continued rising, not because residents lived in fear, but because they genuinely cared about their neighborhood. One crisp autumn afternoon, Daniel watched Noah ride his bicycle down the same street where he had once been afraid to leave it beside the driveway. Emily tended the flower beds she had abandoned months earlier. Neighbors stopped to chat while walking their dogs. Laughter echoed across front lawns. For the first time since moving into Oakwood Heights, the Brooks family finally experienced the neighborhood they believed they had purchased. Daniel quietly reflected on everything that had happened. The greatest victory had never been proving the HOA wrong. It had never been exposing selective enforcement. It had never been winning refunds. The real victory was restoring trust between neighbors. Fear had isolated the community. Fairness reunited it. He realized that rules themselves are not the problem. Communities need standards. Neighborhoods need organization. But rules lose their purpose the moment they are enforced based on favoritism instead of fairness. True leadership does not create fear. It creates confidence. It serves every homeowner equally. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the oak trees that gave the neighborhood its name, Daniel smiled. Oakwood Heights had finally become what it had always promised to be. Not because every house looked perfect, but because every family finally knew they would be treated with equal respect. And that was worth far more than any perfectly trimmed lawn.